I mentioned in the previous video where I went over Serene's potential kit that I would be conceptualizing 2 others that could be playable. I'm going to go for the one that we have more information towards the possibility of, and that is going to be Terravox, who I believe is going to be a playable variant of Dan Heng, because of the connection within story to specifically the permanence, and his association with dragons and the mention of dragons, and his backstory just lines up perfectly. And the colour scheme actually of Terravox in the icon has dark scaling that is black, which doesn't match up to what the Dromus do, but does match up to what we know about Dan Heng with his black hair. His boons in Divergent Universe revolve around shielding. All of them focus on either giving an upgrade to final damage or bonuses towards providing shields. So I think this guy is either going to be Preservation or Remembrance as a shielder. And I don't know which I'd actually want more, because if he was Remembrance doing shielding, it would fill in a missing gap within Remembrance, because currently we have a Remembrance healer but not a shielder. But I also feel like Preservation really needs that love, man. If they can do a good Preservation unit within this version, yeah, I'd be all for it. So I'm just going to list all of his boons. We have Seismic Upheaval, which is his first one, which gives a shield to all ally targets equal to 75% of their max HP, and they obtain a stack called Quartz. And Quartz increases their final damage dealt by 50%. And then, when they no longer have the shield, they lose the bonus of Quartz. In the advanced enhancements, we have notes relating to Bedrock Biter, which increases ally target final damage by 25% for 2 turns. And then we have Kindling Igniter, which for every 2 turns, the ally gets a shield equal to 100% of their max HP that lasts 2 turns. Then we have Primeval Seer. Every time an ally target obtains a shield during night, it increases their damage by 3% that can stack. Then we have his ultimate enhancements, which are Terrestrial Chaser, which outside of the switch interval relating to day and night, when the allies enter the night, it increases their final damage by 30%. Summit Ripper, which makes his buffs available in both day and night. And Land Mender, which additionally increases the final damage dealt by all allies with Quartz by 50%. Something that most of the boons that apply to shielding have in common is that it is percentage based on the max HP of ally characters. Which intrigues me, because it means that he might scale on HP rather than on defense. I think that it's a decent move, but the question is, if he were playable, would it scale on his own HP, which would be way more consistent for gear, or would it scale on the allies? Because in that case it would limit his usage to being with a DPS that has a lot of HP, like for example Castoris. I think it'd be better for his kit personally if it scaled on his own. I think it'd be far more consistent and increase survivability of the team, because applying a shield, for example, to an ally like, for example, Robin, you don't build her HP on purpose. That is not the stat she scales on. So, unless you got a bunch of extra stats in HP, the shield wouldn't do much for her. She would probably die quite quickly. It'd be better than no shielder, but in that case, another character would be better for scaling with her. So I imagine his own HP would be what the shielding scales on. Something else interesting is there's instances of him applying shields to everyone, which means he is giving everyone a shield, and in the case of whether it is through either Preservation or through Remembrance, I would hope it's through skill or through Memo Sprite and nothing related to the ult. Through applying the shield, you get damage bonuses associated with it. And I think that's a neat mechanic, and I think that it would be helpful to the team depending on what it could be. It being final damage increased is interesting, It makes him more versatile because it means that we actually have a bonus from potentially preservation or remembrance, not tied to critical damage, which is flexible. Dan Heng has been associated with both the Dromuses we could offer to feed him dirt, and he's been associated with tanking. There is literally a comment made by the Trailblazer that says that we could make him tank it. It's very funny. The implications have been there for quite a while, and now with Terravox we just have some very explicit connections made to Dan Heng that have such good shielding effects. And I think his potential for support is really high. Depending on his targeting, he could be really good for Feigning. If he does AoE based, he could be good for a lot of team comps, especially if he ends up increasing damage multipliers that don't rely on crit, which is going to actually make him better than Aventurine in some comps, for example DOT that doesn't use it. I think this is the character that has maybe the most potential for application across multiple teams out of the potential options we could end up with. Because I think Serene has the potential to be very specific towards Remembrance only buffs, and I think the final character I'm going to talk about is going to be a Remembrance only character and not able to really be utilized outside of Remembrance comps very well. So yeah, no, I have a lot of faith in the potential of this man. If he ends up playable like this and associated with Terravox's kit, I think this is the best estimate we have of what he could do. But let me know what you think. You could have different ideas from me. I'm just doing it based on the definite information in the game available that I recognize that gives a good enough basis. There's always going to be more specific ways to make him cater towards individual characters instead of very broad like I'm hoping for, because I personally believe it's harder to build a sustain that works very well on an account if they're too limited to the team comp they can be on. It's fair enough if you disagree with me, but his boons are very flexible, unlike with some of the others, like for example, the ones tied to Evernight, which aren't very flexible in what they offer. Anyway, I hope you had fun with this video and let me know what you think. Take care, guys.